Get ready for an unfiltered and uncensored listening experience.
Gender reveal.
They want me to do something that could make sense.
Ako
They
yung
hate
tipo
when
ng
I
tao na
keep
pag
dreaming I'll
dumating
be
ako sa puntong
famous.
sagot na
But I
sagot
don't
na
give a
talaga.
fuck, I'ma keep
Benta niya
chasing.
90 million. Where can you find that?
Don. God
Where can you
damn.
find that?
Hello, I'm back.
And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. We have Omni here in the podcast. Thank you so much for coming. I really, really appreciate it.
Hiya. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so I'm so glad that you've come here to the podcast. So just to let the audience to know, um, who is Omni?
So I'm Omni Wren and I am a transformational coach. And I work with people who have had life-changing injuries and I coach them back to health. It's basically my job started through my own experience of trauma and life-changing injury. And then I went on to help others recover as well.
Oh wow. Can you discuss the various traumas that you've dealt with?
Yeah, absolutely. So my story starts way back, maybe about 15 years ago when I
Oh
was in my
wow.
first car accident. And so I was in my first car accident. At that time, I was a glass blower, and I was doing my degree. I got in a car accident where I sustained injuries that meant that I couldn't do my glass blowing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I changed the way that I was working and I started casting in glass, but I really struggled for some time. And then I got addicted to pain medication, and ended up living in a rehabilitation center
Oh really?
where where I started a health plan and I started getting better. So I came out of there and I started getting my life back on track. And finally, I got a job to go and work in a gallery. And I was really excited actually to get back to where I was. And the day of my job starting, I left my house and I never made it to the job because I was in a second car accident.
Whoa.
Um, so I'd spent all this time getting ready, getting better after my first car accident, getting back on my feet, straight into a second one, which then drastically changed my life again. But this time I developed PTSD, other traumas, other injuries. I got chronic pain and chronic fatigue. And I struggled a little while with that actually. And 2 years later, I had emergency surgery because of that car accident where I had sustained a seatbelt trauma across my stomach. So I had emergency surgery, to which I almost lost my life.
Oh wow.
I spent 5 weeks in hospital, and a further couple of months living with my mum and dad before I moved out back to my own house. And then I was coasting along okay, except I wasn't feeling very well and I got iller and iller. And then 2 years after that, they discovered that I'd been internally bleeding for the entirety of that time. So I'd never recovered from my actual operation. And I had a fifth of the blood cells left in my body that I should have had. So then I had to have blood transfusions, and all sorts. So that is basically my story in a nutshell. So multiple traumas and quite a few setbacks. And then it wasn't until a couple of years after that that I trained as a personal performance coach, and then I did my NLP neurolinguistics, and started setting up my own business to help other people get through the same issues.
Wow, that's
So
great. Like
thank you. Yeah.
everything you've been through is wow. I can't even express a word for that for that. But how are you doing today?
Good. I'm well.
That's
And
good.
for a really long time I thought that I would never recover. And I was told by professionals that I would never recover. Which led to quite a few limiting beliefs, I think, that stunted me for some time. Um, but I'm actually doing really well, and I'm really pleased to say that I'm in a position where I help other people with the same or like traumas. So I think really for me it's more about telling people that even against the odds, um, they do have the opportunity to recover, and a lot of it is just your mindset and what you really believe.
And we're glad that you're here
Yeah.
today. If
Thank you.
if you haven't given up, I think there's no Omni Wren here in the world today.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. I'm so happy that you're okay.
So part of getting over my trauma, so my name actually, Omni Wren, means it means all birds, because all birds can fly. But so I started with a different name originally. And when I started coaching, I was just too traumatized to even talk about my story.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm gonna have to find a way to shelf this and put it aside. And so I legally changed my name. And then as soon as I changed my name, I started getting better, and I found it easier to communicate with other people the things that I'd gone through. So yeah, so it led me to even change my name, to write myself an entirely new story,
Is it something
that
like
was different
when
to
you
the
change
trauma?
your name legally, it's like you're born again, like you're you're doing
Yeah,
your second life?
yeah, exactly.
Oh wow.
Exactly that. And I was so traumatized. Like I was hallucinating, and I was having night terrors, and I'd have flashbacks all the time of my car accidents. And it got to a stage where I'd be like sat at traffic lights, and I'd be hallucinating that I was like in another car accident, and then the lights changed, they'd go green, and then the people would be beeping behind me and stuff. It was just so surreal, and so I needed a way to change, to be able to click back into the fact that I wasn't actually in a car accident. So part of changing my name, I actually have a tattoo on my wrist.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little white one, which is a little OW. And so actually I found out later that they call these anchors, but I didn't know at the time. And so every time I was hallucinating or I was having panic attacks or night terrors, I'd immediately look at my wrist, and I could tell that I wasn't the same girl that I was before, and that's how I would snap out of my trauma circle. So that played a huge part in my recovery, actually changing my name and just moving forward.
That's great. Can we talk about how you got addicted to painkillers? Like, I think none of the people understand that being addictive to something isn't something beyond your control. It's beyond your control.
Oh yes, definitely. So I think, even though I think the worst part was that I told myself
Oh
I
yeah, that's
wasn't
dangerous.
addicted. Um, so I was just like, oh, like I was taking like codeine and tramadol, and um, I would just take more and more and more to deal with my pain and my emotional pain. And I'd always tell myself I could switch it off. I could stop. I could stop that if I wanted. I could stop that if I wanted. And well, it turned out that I couldn't actually. I couldn't stop.
Oh
And
wow.
so I became reliant on those heavily, and it took me some time to come off them. And just recently, so then I changed the type of painkillers that I was taking, and I started taking nerve suppressants instead, and antidepressants. And I have just passed my 3 months clean of no medication at all.
That's good.
So 3 months ago, I gave up all of my painkillers that I'd taken for the past 15 years. So that's another thing that I talk to my clients about, really, is because I was told that I'd be dependent on these medications for some time, for the rest of my life, probably, that I wouldn't be able to cope without them. And I think that's another mindset thing. When I chose to give them up, I think that changed my recovery again. But for a long time, I thought that there was no other way. There was no other way to dull my pain. I didn't think my mindset or my health or, my exercise or my nutrition, I didn't think any of that could help my pain. I thought that the only thing I could do was take these pills. And I've learned, maybe the hard way, actually, that this is not true. It's
Oh
not
wow.
true.
When did you realize it,
Yeah.
that you have to stop taking those medicine?
I think for me, it'd been brewing for some time. And I knew the thing for me is, like, I'm a chronic pain patient, so I was taking these painkillers, but ultimately I was still in pain. So even though I was taking them, I was still never free of pain anyway,
Really?
which concerned me slightly. Yeah. And I think that it's true for many chronic pain patients, is they take these medications, but they're never just pain free. It's not like it just goes away. It just dulls it down. And so that had played in my mind for some time, and I'd started to worry a little bit about my liver and my insides. But also, there's so many side effects. Like, it affects your functioning, your daily functioning, your brain, the way your body works, the way your body recovers. And for me, I started thinking about the idea, just exploring it to see if it would change the way that I was recovering. And then I was like, I want to get rid of all these medications, because I didn't think that they were serving me very well anymore. Because ultimately, over time, even when they have like a big effect on you when you start taking them, you naturally build a resilience. So I was just taking these pills with this resilience to them, and so it seemed like just the next step for me into getting better was to pass them up, really, and to see
Then
if I could do it without them.
then how does it feel after not taking them? Because
I
I've
felt
imagined that it's very difficult.
great. Very difficult. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to lie, my withdrawal was not a pleasant thing. Um,
Can you share your
and
stories about
actually,
there?
it's quite. Sorry.
Can you share your stories when
Yeah.
you're
So
yeah.
withdrawal was hideous. Um, Panic attacks and like sweating, and like I had stomach pains. I had like pains in all my joints. I was like stuttering. My jaw would just start going, oh. I was emotional. It was very, very hard for me to stick to it. And I don't think when I started giving these pills up, that I don't think I ever imagined that it would be as hard as it was. But it's kind of a funny story. So I went away at Christmas on a cruise. So I was on a cruise liner at Christmas, and I was on the ship for was on the ship for 11 or 12 days. And I lasted 2 days before I got neurovirus.
Oh wow.
And I got really sick. I got really sick on the ship. And so I was packed off to the sick bay and put on drips and things. And it had been 5 days before I could hold anything down. And they were like, right, you can start taking your medication again now. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I've gone 5 days now. So I might as well like keep going with this. And they were like, are you sure about that? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, we'll feed it into your IV. And I was like, no, don't feed that into my, I don't want that. Don't give it to me. So as it was, I came out of the sick bay and then I had to be put into isolation because I'd had such a bad virus. And so then I was locked in a cabin in the North Sea with no signal, no telly, and I was not allowed out of the cabin because I was like contaminated or infected or so people were coming to my door and they were like dropping me off food and shutting the door, and so that's where my withdrawal started. So I was just locked in a room on my own, which was probably a bit of torture, but as well a bit of time to think really about what I was doing. And then when I got off the ship and I got home, I was like, I'm gonna keep doing this now. I'm gonna keep going. Mainly because I was like, if I start taking these tablets again, I'm going to be right back at square one, and I do not want to be back at square one. And so I continued going forward. But yeah, so the first 2 weeks were a bit traumatic, really, because I was just locked in a room on my own at sea. But really, that jump started me into giving them up.
Oh, that's
and
great.
then it stayed with me for probably about 7 weeks. It took me to get through my withdrawal.
Oh wow.
Yeah, disclosure here, like, you know, it's probably a better idea to come off them gradually, to like down your dosage gradually. But I just threw myself in there, and once I decided that I wasn't going to take them anymore, so yeah, that was quite a way to stop.
When did you decided to be a coach or like helping someone? Because the reason why I ask that's why I think most people go to this path are thinking that they have surpassed it. You know what I mean? Like they surpassed these traumas, and I think it's time to help someone.
Yeah. I think for me, really, when I started really learning how to get out of it and how to build my own strategies on how to recover, that's when I really wanted to start helping people. And for me, from my experience, I'd seen so many medical professionals. Some of them had told me I would never recover. Some of them said I would always be traumatized. I'd probably never have a job again.
Oh wow.
I would probably never regain my social circle again. And I saw one professional, and he said to me, "Game over."
Oh wow.
And I said to him, well, I don't know what you're saying. And he was like, for you, this is game over. This is the way you will always be. And in that moment, I was like, wow, like, and I suppose at that time I was really impressionable as well, because you go to these professionals and you expect them to know, you expect them to give you the truth. And so he told me this game over, and my heart was broken for such a long time. And I think really when I realized that my life wasn't over and that other people were being told this, I made it my duty to come along and really correct people, because it's okay for professionals to give you the facts and the figures and what they think, but it is not okay for them to completely cap your potential or limit your belief as to how far you can go. And so really, as it unraveled and I started getting better and building my own techniques and my own way to cope with my trauma, I was like, I have to share this. It's like my duty to share this with other people, because if I can stop just one person feeling like their life is over, then not only have I done a good thing, but I've done them justice.
Mm-hmm.
So really, that's how I started training as a coach, because I really wanted to share this with other people.
When you're experiencing this or going through with this, do you have someone that really helped you, or even have that support system in you?
I did actually. I had a few people around me. Obviously, my family were around me, but it wasn't until later on that I went to a life coach myself.
Oh wow.
Again, purely by accident, actually. Purely by accident. I'd actually really hurt my ankle, and I could hardly even walk on it. And another friend of mine, she said I should go and see this guy about acupuncture for my foot. So I went to see him for acupuncture in my foot, and he was like, so tell me a bit about yourself. And I told him a bit about myself, and he was like, would you be interested in doing some work on that? And I was like, no, I don't know about that. And he was like, well, while you're coming and I'm sticking needles in your ankle, you might as well chat to me as we go. And that's how it started. So I started talking to him and bouncing my ideas off him, and really he was a real catalyst to me deciding, because even though I knew I wanted to help people, I didn't know how I was going to do it, and I didn't know how I was going to be able to share my skills or my mindset. And so by going to a life coach, which I'd never been to before, I sort of opened a door where I was like, oh, maybe I could life coach people about this. And then I looked at ways that I could qualify and how I could do my get my certifications and my certificates, and then that's what led to that ultimately. So even though I knew I wanted to help people, I didn't know that it was a possibility that I could coach them
Yeah, and that's
through
powerful,
it.
because when
Really
people
powerful.
going through this dark times, um sometimes the reason why they're going to this path, because they don't have someone who supports them or have their back. That's why
Mm.
they come to the life coaching path, because they know that maybe someone out there needs someone like me, or needs someone who've been through this.
Definitely. And I think, genuinely for some time, I didn't think anyone understood. Mainly because in my close circle, I didn't know anyone in the same position as me. They hadn't been through the same situations. I was one of those people who genuinely felt that PTSD was only for war veterans,
Mm-hmm.
and as far as I was concerned, I hadn't been to war. So, I'd only been in car accidents. So I didn't warrant the ticket that I would be having PTSD symptoms. And I think as well, in terms of help around, there was a lot in terms of like the pain clinic, and there were doctors, and I was seeing other professionals to get medical diagnosis, but not, a lot of them were just giving me diagnosis. They weren't actually telling me how I could help myself. And so really, support networks are funny things, aren't they? Because you don't always know that they exist. You don't always know that they're there, or that people are living similar situations. So for me, I was really isolated, and I didn't talk about my issues with many people because I just felt like they didn't know. Yeah, but I think now with like in terms of mental health and conditions and things like this, like it's becoming more of a talkable subject. Like people are able to approach it and talk about the way that they're feeling and talk about the traumas that they're going through in a more acceptable manner. Because I just felt like I shouldn't be feeling those things. I felt like I didn't warrant those feelings, that there were people worse off than me. I didn't let myself have those feelings that were valid. And I think that that's a really important thing, to be able to talk about how you actually feel and how your situation makes you feel, because until I talked about those things, I couldn't even begin to work on them or to be able to move forward, because I was just constantly spinning them in my own head.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think sounding boards are really, even if people are just coming along to me and talking to me about their experiences and how they feel, at least they are not isolated in that.
Exactly.
Because it's not like it's not necessarily, it's life-changing injuries, even though there are people around, it's not necessarily people, is it? It's not a real common thing that people have. And so the feeling of loss and grief and having to change my life and my job, I think those things, like, people aren't normally forced onto that path. But yeah, so I think
What's your job after the before this, like before your car accident? What do you do? Is it
before
some?
I was in the
Mm-hmm.
car accident, I was a glass blower. So I
No,
was
I mean,
blowing glass, and I
I
was
think.
working in
No, I mean, I think.
bars. I was working in bars.
Oh, I mean, I think the reason why I ask um, is it something that you really passionate to do, like before your car
It is.
accident?
Yeah. No, before my car accident, I left school and I was a nanny for some time, and then I worked as a nursery nurse, and then I did some work in graphics, and then I thought that my job for the rest of my life would be in art. I didn't think for a minute that I would be helping people or coaching people or working with communities of people. It didn't occur to me until much later down the line that when I wanted to help people through the same situation, that I might do this job. And to be honest, I don't know if I even knew it existed. I didn't even know. I mean, I knew about coaching, and I knew people would go and get like professional help to move forward in their careers. But I wasn't really aware that people would go and get help for this in terms of recovery. And so it was quite a new concept to me, that I could go ahead and help people myself. Yeah, but before my accident, it wasn't even on my radar. And to be honest, I didn't have the experience that I do now to be able to help them.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have. So no, if your question is really, did I think about counseling people or coaching people before I'd had a car accident? It wasn't. No, it hadn't even occurred to me at all. It's directly because of the experience that I've been through.
And you know what? Before I started this podcast, I didn't even know that there's even a coach for this. To be honest with you, that's why it's so overwhelming. And I'm so glad that people are reaching out and sharing their stories, because I didn't know at the time before I started podcast. And when I realized that people really need this, and people really experiencing those difficult times, and it's where I started my appreciation to the people who are doing this, because it's very underappreciating job. You know what I mean? Like, not a lot of people
Yeah.
really truly understand this.
No, and I think as well, strangely, I was talking to a friend of mine about this just a few days ago, and we were saying, when you're a kid in school, like you go, oh, what do you want to be? What do you want to be for your job? Like, and you're going to be a teacher, or you're going to be a social worker, or you're going to be in the forces, you're going to be a policeman or a fireman. Never is it on the radar that you'll be a life coach or some kind of support network for somebody, or they're just not promoted necessarily, or they definitely weren't when I was in school. I think times are changing and people are becoming more aware of these jobs, but they're not necessarily like the first jobs that you think of, which I think is, it is quite a new age thing, I suppose. Coaching is, especially life coaching, has come along quite quickly in the last maybe 10 years. But before that, I hadn't really heard of it at all. Even though there's many types of therapy.
Exactly. And I want to go through with the experience that you have, so that people can understand, even though they they don't truly experiencing it. But I think it's important to talk about it, sharing the stories. So I want to talk about, let's go through with the traumas that you're experiencing. Like, what is it like, and how's your mental health during that time?
My mental health was, I think I hit probably my lowest points
I
um
imagine.
of my entire life in my mental health battles. And I think, like, being traumatized, I was just, like I say, I was just having flashbacks. All I could think about was car accidents. It was actually a white car that hit us in the second car accident, and I couldn't even look at white cars. Couldn't cope. Like, even if I was sat at a junction, white cars crossing the junction, even if they were at traffic lights, couldn't cope with that. Couldn't park next to them. um I was very low in myself. Like, I just had no, I didn't know how I was going to get out of this. I thought this was my life forever, and a lot of the time I would beat myself up. So I would be punching my legs and bruising my legs and like trying to feel something. So even though I was like numb, I was just so emotionally trashed. And I think during that time I'd had a lot of sleep deprivation. I wasn't necessarily looking after myself. I wasn't getting out of bed. um I wasn't doing the things, I wasn't connecting with other people. I was just hiding away. And I think that really, it is a really dark time to think that you're on your own. It is a really dark time. And I think it carried on for a while before I had my surgery. And I remember one day in particular, I'd probably been there for about 4 weeks. And I was all hooked up to machines. I had catheters in me, I had drainage in me, I had monitors all over me, and I hadn't got out of my bed. I'd lost loads of weight and I was nil by mouth. And I was just laying there and I was thinking, do you know, I think you're going to die. And I I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make this. I don't know if I'm going to make this. And really, in those moments, I can't even describe, a greater force came over me and said, no, you're not. No, you can't. You cannot allow this to happen. Like, I can't even, no sooner had I thought, right, just close your eyes and let go, that something else had like interjected and gone, no, absolutely no, you've got to survive this. And the minute I thought, right, I've got to survive this, I was like, right, I'm gonna have to drive harder here. I'm gonna have to like dig deep. And that was the day that I decided that this wasn't going to happen to me anymore. I had to get out of that bed. But until that time, until I'd hit that very low point, I didn't think that there was much for me. I didn't, in terms of relationships, in terms of my social life, in terms of work, my self-worth, in terms of like adventure or traveling the world or opportunities. I thought that there was nothing left for me. And so I really feel for people who are in that space at this moment in time, because it's really hard to see further than the end of the day. Do you know? Like, I just used to will my days away. I just used to be like, I just want to get to the end of the day so I can go to sleep. And then I'd get up. I'd be like, I just want to. And then I wouldn't even sleep. I'd just be laying there. I'd be like, oh, I can't wait for daylight, because then it'll be another day. And then I'd get to the day and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't wait for the night. And that is just, it's no way to live at all. And I try to be very open about my feelings and the way that I felt in that time, because again, it's a very isolating space. And you think, oh, I shouldn't be thinking that, or I don't deserve to be thinking this, or people are losing their lives all over the place all of the time. I should be like embracing the fact that I have a life and not feeling this. But like, to lift that feeling, especially when you're told things like game over, it's very, very hard. Very hard.
What helped you
And
during those times? Like, what helped you push through?
I think actually for me, I just couldn't do it to my parents. And I think so when it really started to get really, really bad, it wasn't the fact that I had a fear of taking my life or losing my life. Ultimately, it was the fact of what I would leave behind.
That's powerful.
And I couldn't do it to them. Like, they'd seen me through, years of pain. They'd sat by me day in, day out in my bed in hospital. They'd cared for me. And I just could not let go, because I just couldn't do it to them to start with. And it took me a while to learn that I was doing it for myself as well. But it was too tragic for them. I couldn't. And then I kept thinking, if I let go and I wasn't trying, and if I wasn't here anymore, then I didn't have the capacity to try anyway. So even if I was trialing and I was failing, or I wasn't getting anywhere, at least I was trying. And so that's what really stayed with me. So in my darkest times, I was like, you've just got to keep trying. You've just got to keep trying. Like, even if it never gets any better, you have to keep trying, because one day maybe it will break, maybe something will change. And it actually really surprised me when it did. Really surprised me when my life started changing, and like I started gathering like momentum and got a bit of traction in my recovery. And when I started really getting better, and I was like, oh my, like, it's not been an easy route, but because I tried, and I feel like, you know, days and days went by where I thought I was going nowhere, maybe even years that I was just like stuck in this stagnant place. But yeah, and then I learned to do it for myself, and I learned that there was reward in that, and that, you know, I didn't have to be in this lonely place. I could actually really start working on it, and so I did. Yeah,
And I think
it's very
um
yeah.
yeah, everything that you've said is very powerful, because not a lot of people really truly understand that you've been through, especially for those people who are experiencing right now, this right now. Like, they don't realize yet that the beginning is always difficult. Those baby steps, those little steps towards recovery, towards um living out your second life. And I think
Yeah,
that's the most difficult part, when you start to rehabbing, doing those little steps. Like, it's like you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, especially for those
yeah,
people who
because
haven't.
all of those baby steps, the tiniest steps, like nobody ever told me that, like, it doesn't matter how quickly you're going. It doesn't matter how big your steps are, how small your steps are. If you just brush your teeth in the morning, it does not matter, because as long as you are progressing, you are progressing. And that means that you're moving forward. And so no matter how long it takes, you little bit, little, eventually you can look back and go, oh, wow, that's a lot of little steps. That's a lot of
Exactly.
little steps. Yeah.
And it's not bad to look back and appreciate the things that you took. You know what I mean? Like, it's powerful for yourselves to look back and say, "Oh, I've been through this." It's
Mm,
very powerful.
yeah. I think the other thing is, like, you know, I've got real gratitude
That's
for it.
good.
You know, at the time, I
Oh,
just
at the time it's very
hated my
difficult.
life,
I imagine.
just hated it. And like now, I'm like, wow, like, you know, even though I had to live that, I've got these tools and I've got this experience. And like now I get to help other people with it. And I have survived it and I have grown through it. And like, you know, even though at times I was like, this is rough, rough.
Exactly.
Um, even now, if I knew what I know now, if I knew it then, you know, I'd do it 10 times over. And people say, oh, you're crazy. You're crazy. You know, if you didn't have that experience, would you go through it again? And I absolutely would, because it made me. It absolutely made me, you know, like there's been highs and there's been lows. But at the end of the day, I guess that's what you call living, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, I've lived a life. I have lived these experiences, and like, you know, they're not always positive ones, but I have learned from them.
And I think that's
And so when
powerful.
I have my clients, yeah, and so when I have my clients, I really try, um I talk to them about like the 80-year-old story, I call it, you know, when they're sat in their rocking chair when they're 80, you know, would they rather say to somebody, oh, you know, what did you do in your life? You know, I left school and I got a job and I got a car and then I had a family and then everything was dandy. Or would you say, I've been on this epic journey of ups and downs, and like, you know, I've struggled and I found it hard and I've learned this and I've done this and this and this and this. Like, you know, think about when you get to that stage, when you are reflecting back and you go, oh yeah, no, I've actually really lived a life. like I've really lived a life, and like, you know, learning to embrace that is like, I think, a really powerful space in your journey, because it is what makes you, isn't it? You know, you can't get to where you are until you've done the things that you have to do. And so for me, a lot of the time, gratitude, even now when I struggle, I think, oh, do you know, I'm still really grateful that I got to do that. I'm still really grateful that I got that experience, or I got to feel those things, because they, you know, they inform my work. They inform how I help other people. And without those experiences, I could never talk about the things that I've spoken about. You know, I could never reflect on them, if you like.
Exactly. And it's very daunting for other people when they hear those stories. Like, it's very difficult for them to grasp. You know what I mean? Like, for example, when people are struggling at the work, like, it's very difficult for them to get that positive attitude. But when they
Mm.
hear other people struggling, and it's like, oh, you've been through that. Now they're starting to have this gratitude. All right, I have a great job, or if I don't have a great job, I have the ability to quit, because not a lot of people have that ability. And for those who are having like their mental struggles, like, it's very it's very difficult for them to see that light at the end of the tunnel, because they don't have someone who is guiding them. And I think that's where the coaching and therapy comes in, is where there's people who are listening and trying to help you through this.
Yeah. Because I always think, you have if you have nothing, if you feel you have nothing going for you, you have no opportunities, you have no life, you have, you know, you don't think you're worthy, all of these things, the one thing that they cannot take away from you is the choice. You have the choice to either keep going down that road or choose to change it. And I really value that, you know, like, I had that choice, you know, like, even when I felt I had nothing going for me, I still had the choice to be able to change that. And you know, I don't think we're necessarily always told that, like you say, like in terms of like jobs or relationships, or, you know, our opportunities. Sometimes they don't just come to us, do they? And they are difficult, but you can choose to make the change. You can choose to take those steps to move. And so, even for those people listening now who feel like they have no anything, they have nothing, they have this choice to
Exactly.
change it.
And also
Yeah.
that failures really helps. Like, a lot of people are afraid to fail, but they don't realize
Mm,
that failing on something, or going through something that is very, very difficult, it helps you grow as a person, because you learn the mistakes, you learn what to do, you learn what to avoid, and especially you learn how to persist, because persistent is very difficult. Having that persistence mindset is very difficult to have.
mm,
Like, let's imagine
yeah.
that.
But hey, we all learn to walk. We
Exactly,
all
yeah.
learn to walk, right? So this is like a perfect example. Like, you just sit still when you're a baby, and then you learn to crawl, and then you have to learn your movement and your momentum, and then you have to learn how to coordinate, and then eventually you learn to walk, and then you get to walk quicker, and then you turn into running, and you're running, and then you have, like, you know, without all those times that you fell over, all those times that you bumped into stuff, all those times that you knocked your head, you know, you wouldn't be able to get to the point where you are walking now if you hadn't have done those things. And so I think as well, like, when you learn through trial and error, not so much failures. I wouldn't say failures. There's no failure, there's only feedback. Is what I always tell my clients. But even when you're learning strategies and new ways to get around it, and so really you're fitting the pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly. When
Yeah.
a person approach you, like they've been through everything that you've been through, what are the steps to to pass through this? Because I imagine it's very difficult, especially when a person has no, I don't want to say no hope, but they don't have the uh what do you call this, like more power of themselves, like they don't have motivation to do something anymore,
Yeah.
especially when they're in a car accident or they've been experiencing a tremendous traumas. So what are the steps?
I think really your mindset.
That's great.
My mindset, choose, that thing where I talk about choice.
Mm-hmm.
I think that really ultimately is a very powerful factor. And I think really the other thing is like celebrating your wins, because if you do not celebrate your smallest wins, you are never going to feel the joy of why you're even trying. And so, for me, way back when, like, I was laying in that hospital bed, my first goal that I set myself was to toilet myself, which seems the smallest goal, right? But I was laying in bed, I hadn't got out of my bed for like 4 weeks, I hadn't eaten, and across the hallway, probably 10 steps away, 10 steps, I needed to go to get to the toilet. And I was like, I'm going those 10 steps. I'm going those 10 steps. And then I was like, yeah. And now I'm going to do 11 steps and 12 steps. And, then like just little achievements during the day. So, like, when you've got no motivation to do anything, like brushing my teeth I used to do this thing, I call it the toothbrush stare. Just stare at the toothbrush on my bed. Just be looking at it. 5 minutes would go past, 10 minutes would go past, sometimes 20 minutes. 20 minutes would go past and I'd still be looking at this toothbrush. And then I'd be like, you could have brushed yourself 10 times in that time. So like,
Exactly.
you're just going to pick it up and you're just going to brush your teeth. And so then I'd pick up I'd brush my teeth and I'd be like, oh, I've brushed my teeth today. If I do nothing else, I've brushed my teeth, Same with my hair. I used to go really long periods of time without brushing my hair because the effort, it just seemed like so much effort. Or to get in the shower, so much effort. But like, just to go, sometimes I'd come out of the shower and I'd just be, at least I'm clean. At least I'm clean. And that is a win for today, and those little things, celebrating the fact that I found that tiny bit of emotional drive to go, right, come on, that's it, you've got to do it. And then that led to my bigger goals that I wanted to do. But just getting out of bed at one point for me was near on impossible. Like, it just felt like the biggest, and I'd have to psych myself up for so long. And until I started celebrating the fact that I'd done it, I didn't really feel any reward in it because I just saw it as something that you have to do. And so really your mindset and rewarding yourself for working hard, because even those tiny steps, they're the biggest ones, really. Once you start getting your momentum, that gets a lot easier, right? The
Yeah.
hardest steps are those really tiny ones where you're learning, those really tiny steps where you're like, I've just got to brush my teeth, but I don't want to brush my teeth. Or just eating a meal, You know, sometimes I'd be like, oh, I can't even eat. I can't even eat. And then I'd be like, yes, I've eaten, I've nourished my body, I've given my body something to get better with. Um, and that really, after a while, started to excite me that I would be and then it started turning into challenges. So I was like, I challenge myself to do this, or I challenge myself to do that. And then I'd start writing little tick lists, and I'd have like 3 challenges of the day, and they wouldn't be big challenges. They would be like, you know, get dressed, or, you know, take yourself downstairs, or, you know, open a window and breathe out some fresh air. You know, and once I ticked off these 3 things, I'd be like, yes, I'm accomplished for the day. I've done my bit. Like, if I do nothing else today, I've done my bit. So tomorrow I'll do a bit more, a bit more, a bit more. So I think those are the 2 really big things, you know, really appreciating yourself for trying, for showing up for yourself, because nobody can show up for you, you know, with all the want and the will in the world. You know, I could probably brush your teeth for you, but like, you know, it's not half as rewarding as if you do it for yourself.
Exactly.
Um,
And it's very powerful
yeah.
that you've said. Like those small things, it looks like a boring things to do, but it's it's a huge help for your own psyche. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
when people think or they have have this idea of doing something that they want, they sometimes procrastinate. Like they're saying a bunch of things that they want to accomplish, but they're staring at their laptops, they're staring at their walls, they're staring at something that, you know, preventing them to do something that that they want to do. Like for me, for
And
example.
sometimes I'd have to push really hard.
Exactly.
Sometimes I'd have
It's
to push
very
really,
difficult.
and like, you know, then I'd get to the point where I'd have to go outside. And I used to, on my old house, I used to have a drop lock.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to have the drop lock. So I used to purposely put my keys in my rucksack and then go out the door and shut the door. And then I'd be like, well, now I'm locked outside. And then I'd be like, well, I'm outside, so I might as well carry on because the door's already locked. So just, you know, I either like rummage around in my bag for the key, or just get on with this. And I think those things,
Exactly.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I've talked about earlier. Um I stutter a lot. So sometimes it really, you know, diminish my confidence, especially doing podcasts. But it's important to do those little things just to get you started, because when you have that momentum, you have that motion, then you're like a truck or a train. You're
Hmm.
nonstop. You're doing nonstop without even
Yeah.
realizing it.
And I don't, you know, I do not want any of these listeners to think for 2 seconds that my life is easy,
Yeah.
because it is not. Because I still get up and I struggle, and I still have to find confidence to come onto these podcasts and talk about my story, and I still some days find it hard to show up for my clients when I'm having a slightly negative day. You know, I am still human. I have just learned the way to like strategize around it. I've just learned how to work around it, and so, you know, it is a work in progress. It is,
And
you know,
I'm
I don't
grateful.
want anyone to think that I've cracked it or I'm perfect, because I'm still working on it. I'm still working.
And I'm grateful that you've come to the podcast and share your stories. I know it's very difficult because I've talked a lot of uh life coach in this podcast, and it's very difficult for them to tell their stories. And I realize that because it's not about having a difficult time remembering or even telling their stories, but sometimes the emotion comes up. Sometimes they've they've they have this feeling of overwhelming emotion because they're retelling the experience that their brain doesn't want to remember because they
Hmm.
want to move forward in their life. But one of the reason why decided to do this because they want to help someone, and sharing your difficult stories, sharing your stories is very intimate and very difficult for someone who is, for example, like you. So I'm thankful for that.
No, thank you for letting me tell your story, my story, and like, telling your listeners about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm really grateful that they have the chance to listen.
and the reason why I started, you know, I started contacting you because I read your stories, and even though it's isn't a little synopsis, and but I think it's very powerful for someone who's who's been dealing with a lot of traumas in their life, and they decided that, you know what, I want to move forward in my life, or maybe your stories will trigger them to, all right, I have to start doing something that I want, because I
Yeah.
imagine being that being that someone who's in a car accident or been through a lot of traumas. I've imagined it's very difficult to get up in the morning, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Because
Yeah. And I understand. And like, I know those people will be listening right now going, oh, but I can't, but I can't, but I can't. But just know if you can't today, one day you will.
that's
One day,
powerful.
you know, even if you can't do it today or tomorrow or the next day or in a week's time, one day you will get up out of that bed and progress will start happening
Other than what we
one day.
talked about earlier, um, what what other ways to help those people to like realize that, oh, I have to do something. Oh, I have to do what Omni said. So how can we help them?
Um, I think really they say if you turn up and you do the things that you've always done, you will get the same results that you've always got.
Oh wow.
But if you turn up and you do something different, then you have a chance that you will get a different result and that something will change for you. So if you keep up and you keep doing the same thing again and again and again, the same stuff is going to happen again and again and again. And until you tweak what you're doing and try something new, then you won't get a new result, will you? And so I think that's why I say to other people, you've just got to try, because if you just try something new, you've got a very good chance that you'll get a different result.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful, especially for those who are dealing with extreme mental health like depression, anxiety. I wanna talk about the depression part of that of that uh of your past. Um what triggers those episodes? Like, I understand that having PTSD isn't something like, you know, an ongoing part of your brain, but sometimes it triggers to something that you're unaware of. Like, how do you deal with that?
I think the best way to start dealing with it is to acknowledge it. So for a really long time, I'd have triggers, things that would send me spiraling, and I would just deny the fact that it was happening. Just deny it, deny the fact that I was allowed to feel that, or deny the fact that I was going through it again. And I think really to just acknowledge that space, to appreciate that space, to go, oh, do you know, I'm allowed to feel depressed today. I'm allowed to feel like I'm having a bit of a rough ride. I'm allowed those feelings. And then once I allowed myself to feel them, then I could start going, right, okay, you felt that now. What are you going to do about it? You know, you're feeling this depressed, you're feeling really low. What is the first step that I'm going to take to try and make myself feel better? But I think until you let yourself feel those feelings, you can't work on them or work past them, because they're just spiraling out of control. And I think, you know, nobody's free of the feeling of depression. Nobody's free of like good days or bad days, or, you know, ups or downs. They are feelings and they are all valid. And so for me, when I spiral, or when I'm having a hard time, or when I'm struggling, I just go, do you know, okay, I'm just going to allow myself to feel that for a minute. I'm going to go and sit on the sofa and eat ice cream. I'm going to gather myself a little bit. And then when I feel ready, when I felt that feeling enough and I've appreciated it enough, then I'm going to do something to get out of it. So instead of running from it, just sitting with it is, I think, it's a really powerful thing. And it's not always pleasant. It's not always pleasant to go, oh, I feel terrible, I feel depressed today, it's the end of the world today. But then I always start thinking, you know, but there is a tomorrow. And so even if I feel this all day today or the next day, there will be another day that I don't feel this low. And so just sitting with it and allowing it, really. And so if you're feeling those feelings, you know, don't try and beat yourself up over them, or say that you can't have them, or you shouldn't, they're not valid, or, you know, guilt around these things is not, it's not a good place to put yourself, because there's no need, because if you're feeling rubbish, you don't need to be beating yourself to feel even more rubbish. You just got to look after yourself. So in that moment, you just have to go, right, well, I am just going to close the door today, and I'm not going to go outside. But, you know, I'm not going to do this forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so in those really dark moments, just not putting pressure on yourself either.
Does someone approach you,
No pressure.
but they have this I won't say stubbornness. The reason why I said it, because I understand that when a certain people experience this, especially a life threatening experience, traumas, they sometimes have this mindset that I'm stuck with this and there's nothing I can do. But they approach you, but it's something that it really triggers or embedded in their brain, in their mindset. Does someone
Yeah.
approach you with that, or how can we help them to just push through?
Sometimes people approach me with that. And for them, I just try, for me, I think it's really working on their limiting beliefs. So like you know, I'm too sick for this, I'm in too much pain for this, I'll never get better, I'll never do this, I'll never do that, this will always be the same. Ultimately, working on those beliefs, if you believe that, that will always be as far as you go. But if you start believing that there's an opportunity for something else, or if you try something else might work, then what have you got to lose anyway? So I always say to these people, like, you can carry on how you are and how you feel, but you could try this way, and if this doesn't work for you, you can definitely, you can always go backtrack, you can always go back to where you started. And so very rarely do they ever go back to where they started, because I'm like, well, what have you got to lose? If that's all those feelings, if that's where you think you are, then if you just try, what have you got to lose? And really, they haven't got anything to lose, have they? It's everything to gain.
Exactly. And it's very powerful to
Everything to
have that,
gain.
like the mindset that you have nothing to lose. Because sometimes having that mindset really um gains you more. Like like what you've said. It's just you're just gaining more when you have that mindset that
Yeah,
you have nothing to lose.
yeah, yeah. Nothing to lose at all. So, if you just try and you just gain a tiny little bit, then you've gained this tiny little bit, and your life is that tiny little bit better. And so, quite often, because those first steps, like I said before, they are the hardest ones.
Mm-hmm.
Just even thinking that you might be able to get out of this. Is this for you? Could this happen for you? Just those first steps. And then quite often what I see through my clients is they start seeing a change, and then they start getting excited, and then, like they go from strength to strength. And it's not necessarily because of the work that I do, it's because of the reward that they're getting themselves, because they're learning that they can move from that space.
And that's
Yeah.
powerful. Before I let you go, I'm just gonna ask you one last thing. What advice you can give to someone who's been dealing with this right now and who are starting to realize that, all right, I need to do something, because it's very powerful if it comes to someone who've experienced it all, because some people don't listen to people who doesn't experience what they're experiencing, because
No.
their mindset is when someone's talking about their experience without experiencing it, they might be thinking, you haven't experiencing it. Why are you talking about this? Why are you trying to encourage me to do something that you haven't really experienced?
Yeah, because you don't know. Because you don't know.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people.
Oh wow.
I'd turn up to all these doctors all suited and booted. They've spent 7 years in university getting these qualifications. Have they ever felt how I feel? No, they have not. No, they haven't. They've just read a book and got here. And I was definitely one of those people who felt that. And I completely overlooked the fact that many things in this world have already been done. Like the stories, the experiences, the opportunities, the magic has already happened. Like, we are in this cycle, and so very rarely is there anything new. And so, if you are starting out and you are in this depressive place, there will be somebody in this world who has felt the same as you, and there will be somebody who's experienced something similar. And because of that, there is help for you. And like, so, even if you haven't found it yet, or you haven't found somebody to talk to who knows yet, doesn't mean that they're not out there. It doesn't mean that they haven't survived it or they can't help you with it. And so, for these people who are starting out and they're feeling these feelings, just reach out, just ask questions, find somebody who's got something alike, or find somebody to work with, and just give yourself enough worth to try, give yourself enough worth and enough hope and enough self-love to want to try, because when you learn to try, that's when movement happens, really. Yeah.
And that's the perfect way to end this podcast. Again, Omni, thank you so much for coming. I really, really, really appreciate it. And I want to, apologize in advance when I stutter. I don't know why. Sometimes when we talk about certain things, I stutter. I don't know why. Anyway, but thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And I hope that
Thank
you've
you.
enjoyed our conversation.
I have. Thank you so much for having me.
With that being said, Nick Barellano podcast is available on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. And don't forget. Oh, before I forgot, I almost forgot where they can find you.
They can find me. They can find me on Instagram at Omni Wren, or I actually run a free group on Facebook, which is Recovery After a Life-Changing Injury. So they can come along and get hints and tips from me there, or just drop me a message, ask me questions. Definitely reach out and I'll see if I can help.
All right. And please reach out to Omni. So, with that being said, peace out, people.
They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that could make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. I got all this potential that's deep inside of me, but they hate when you're successful cause they try to be. They sit there being judgmental because you're trying things, and they just want you to settle and do the right thing. So get a good job, don't slack off. Wake up every morning, make a good impression on your boss. Don't do anything that I wouldn't do, and when you're making money, make sure you don't spend it too soon. Fuck that, I'll do what I wanna do. I got a different path from everyone, and that includes you. Who are you to tell me how to live life? In these times it feels like nobody's right, yeah. So I'ma figure out what else we succeed, and then invest all of my time into that and proceed. I need whatever the hell could make me happy, and I don't think you have a clue what could that be. They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that could make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that can make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. I think this life could be special if I get rid of the devils. They think that I am a rebel, I think they want me to settle. There's nobody on my level, they think that work is too stressful. I think that work is essential, the grind is all in your mental. And I don't think you understand what I'll go through just to be in control of my life soon. All the negativity, man, I'm immune. I don't really need a mask with all I've been through. I've been making changes for the ages. 5-10 year plans are contagious. I attack that shit, I'm tenacious. And if you ain't, get the fuck out of my way then. Got one life, I won't regret it. I will fight until I get it. I'll look back one day from heaven and say, damn, I learned some lessons. And say, damn, I have no questions. I had fun in every second, and the journey was a blessing, yeah. They tell me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do